Oh man, the Lions. Those losing ass, lowly Detroit Lions. You know, we talk about the Browns of the past and the Jaguars and the Jets, and they're easy to make fun of, and they have lots of bad history. But a team, an organization, everybody knows is really bad, but they don't get the crap that they deserve. It's the Detroit Lions. And I say that with love and kindness in my heart. Not really, because they're supposed to be a divisional rival, but who gives a crap about them? Just like who gives a crap about my Bears at this point. As a Bears fan, my organization is a shit show. And even they don't stack up to the level of shit show that is the Detroit Lions. And Lions fans know this. They own this. They don't really want to accept it. They just come to grips with that reality. So yet again, here's another offseason where the Detroit Lions, after screwing it up so horrendously badly the last time and hiring Bob Quinn and hiring frickin' Matt Patricia, you see the writing on the wall. It's going to be a bad move from day one, but they did it anyways. They insisted, they persisted, and they paid the price. And they deserved to pay the price. Those are really dumb hires. Now they're looking for a new general manager and a new head coach. And a few days ago, they made the decision of who they were going to hire. And they hired a general manager from the Rams, which I find it pretty interesting because, you know, the Lions ultimately are going to have to build a champion through the draft. As free agents, who the hell is going to want to go to Detroit, right? And they've got so many holes on that roster, you will have to have a lot of success in the draft. So I find it very interesting that the Lions went to an organization that hasn't had a first-round pick since 2016 to find their next general manager in Holmes. But maybe you say, hey, he was a part of the team that drafted Aaron Donald and has found some other guys in the draft. So, you know, part of drafting Cooper Kupp, for example, in the third round. So how bad can it really be? Fair point. But, you know, for a team that never really seems to find experienced folks to run things, it's a risky move to hire Holmes as your general manager. But just as importantly was, who are they going to hire as their head coach? And what I really found interesting was a lot of people initially thought, and so did I, that Robert Saleh was going to be the choice for the Detroit Lions. Like, he is from Michigan. He played at Central Michigan. Like, he had coached in that area. Like, seemed like all indications were he was going to be that dude there. And then he wasn't, and he went to the Jets instead. And then you're thinking, okay, you've hired the dude from the Rams. Why wouldn't he bring in Brandon Staley? Because Brandon Staley has been a hot commodity, and he's a quick riser through the ranks, and you've worked with him, and you're familiar with him from the Rams organization. But the Rams ended up losing him to the Chargers in L.A., and Brandon Staley's now the new head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. So you're trying to figure out, like, who's going to be the guy for the Lions, and then you start to hear these reports that it's going to be Dan Campbell. And I'm thinking, Dan Campbell? Former Dolphins interim Dan Campbell? Role-playing number 3 tight end in the decade, a decade in the league, Dan Campbell? Yes! Apparently that's how they had a hard-on for. And we found that out as they've officially made the announcement that Dan Campbell, previously from the New Orleans Saints as their assistant head coach, is coming to Detroit. And he's taken over. He's going to be your new head coach, Lions fans. Rejoice and celebrate. Ooh. I really wonder what Lions fans are thinking right now. Because this has certainly got to be a surprise for some of you, a surprise for a lot of you. It might even be a surprise for some people in league circles. Now, what maybe really will freak you out is the fact that they reportedly gave him a 6-year contract, which is a long time to give somebody a contract when they have 0 NFL head coaching experience. Now, you could be a raging dumb dick like Michael Silver from whatever the fuck the NFL Network goes. He's a real professional, though, so his takes matter. And you could criticize the organization and question why they would give somebody that had no leverage. It's a fair point. You know, like, the only opportunities left were the Lions, the Texans, or the Eagles, so, you know, how much leverage did Dan Campbell really have? I doubt he wants either one of those other 2 damn jobs. That's how favorable Detroit looked by comparison and how bad those other 2 situations look. But guy with no major NFL head coaching experience outside of the 5-7 he went as an interim coach for the Dolphins years back when he replaced Philbin when he was fired. It's an interesting point. Like, why would you tie yourself down to a guy for 6 years when you just fired your last head coach in less than 3? And you know what? It's an interesting hire. You're taking a guy who hasn't been an offensive coordinator, wasn't an offensive coordinator there in New Orleans, because that's ultimately always going to be Sean Payton. No matter if somebody else, even in that organization, has that label, it's always going to be Sean Payton. But if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the first Saints assistant of any kind that's been directly hired by somebody else to be a team's head coach. Yeah, because I even think, wasn't it Dennis Allen was there with the Saints for a little bit, but then he went somewhere like the Broncos before he got a head coaching job? I'm just trying to think through, I think that's what it is, the first assistant under Sean Payton that went directly to being hired somewhere else, which maybe throws up a red flag, but maybe it doesn't. Dan Campbell's a name we've heard before, and he's gotten some interviews before. But it's a bit of a surprise. And then to tie yourself to a guy for 6 years? I know what the skeptics are going to say right now. Understandably so. The Lions are a dumpster fire. They might not be as notable of a dumpster fire as the Jets or the Jags, but they're every bit the dumpster fire. So your answer is to go out and hire yet another unproven general manager and yet another unproven head coach. What the hell sense does that make? Valid concern, valid criticism. Then you're going to sit there and say, well, you bring in an offensive type of guy, but he's not really a quarterback whisperer or a quarterback guru, so how is he going to interact with Matthew Stafford? Or if you make the decision to draft a young quarterback this year to eventually replace Matthew Stafford, what are you doing here? Again, valid question, because if you're hiring a guy like Campbell and you're going to have to heavily lean on potentially an offensive coordinator, if they do good things with a Matthew Stafford or a young quarterback, then that guy is going to be a hot commodity in coaching circles, might get a job, and then you're left with that revolving door of offensive coordinators rotating in and out every couple of years. Tough spot to be in. Frankly, if I'm the Lions, I'd rather have that problem than the other problem of the team sucks and nobody wants anybody that's involved with your organization. It's just me. But the whole criticism they gave him 6 years. What did you give him 6 years for? I know that this is exactly about. This is about making a statement and trying to create a culture. And when you're talking about hiring a head coach like this isn't the same as when the Jaguars overpaid Nick Foles intentionally because they wanted to make a statement. In a salary cap era, that is dumb, reckless bullshit. And the people involved with that decision should be immediately fired. Eventually they were, but they should have been immediately fired and then not allowed to consummate that contract. Because that was just really, really dumb. You don't overcorrect or overpay when the market conditions suggest you should do something differently. For head coaches, though, it's a little different. It's not really counting against your salary cap. It's not going to impact your roster necessarily. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to wipe out all of the damage that was done by the Bob Quinn and specifically Matt Patricia era. They created a toxic, guttural culture there. That is not something that's going to be changed overnight. That's not something to be changed in one day. And at least if you're the Detroit Lions, if you feel like you found your person that can create that positive culture, that winning culture, then agreeing to a contract with him for 6 years, especially when you know you're not going to have to pay him top dollar because he did not have a bunch of success on the resume in terms of as a head coach. He didn't have a bunch of competition out there for him in the marketplace. So 6 years at an average amount, why wouldn't you take that risk? If it doesn't work out in 3 or 4 years, you're right back in the same cycle again and you're not losing that much money. But that's part of the problem. The Detroit Lions are trying to get out of a cycle of where they're getting rid of guys after 3 or 4 years. So to me, this makes sense. And when you look at some of the things that former players, current Saints players are saying about Dan Campbell and his leadership and his coaching style, these guys are swearing by him and avowing by him. And that's got to carry at least some weight. And they're not just saying, we think he's a really good guy and he's a good motivator. And people are, saying things like, he's fantastic and I would walk through walls for him. That has to translate somehow. That doesn't automatically guarantee. You can come in and create a great culture and be a great leader and your team still sucks. That absolutely can happen. But for the Detroit Lions, compared to what they had with Matt Patricia, they're trying to have a guy come in and change that culture from day one. And a guy like Dan Campbell can potentially do that. And this is a guy that did have a little bit of a run and a little bit of experience being a head guy and he did the best he could after he took over for the fired Joe Philbin. Like I said, a few years back, I think it was 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And he went 5-7. So he has some experience, some expertise. This is a guy that also played in the league for a number of years. So there's a certain level of respect that's going to come along with that. And sometimes you look at these guys that hung around the league a long time, but they weren't great physical talent. They weren't great athletes. That suggests that they had some smarts to them. That suggests that they had some ability to grasp and feel the game, that they represented themselves well. They were good leaders in the locker room. They were a leader of men. And sometimes that's why those guys are able to sit there and hang around for so long like Campbell did. And now look at this. You never know with these coaching hires. Let's be clear. These guys could be the sexiest candidates of all and totally, completely, absolutely suck. I used the Kyle Shanahan comparison on Twitter on Wednesday, saying for the talk about the 6-year contract. Shanahan got a 6-year contract when he got hired by the 49ers. He had no previous head coaching experience. And he took his team to the Super Bowl by year 3. To which you're going to say, well, yeah, but that situation is different. Yes and no. Kyle Shanahan was known as kind of like a quarterback whisperer and all of this. But this guy face-planted as a play caller in the Super Bowl as the Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator. We know he did. 28-3 can't totally be blamed on the Falcons defense and Dan Quinn. We know that too. I mean, he completely and totally face-planted as a coordinator in the biggest game. Ironically enough, it was a foreshadowing of what came for him with the fucking 49ers a couple of years later. But the reality is, if you're a Lions fan, you absolutely would love the thought of a Dan Campbell coming in and taking your team to the Super Bowl by year 3. Unlikely as it is, it could certainly happen. But the point I'm getting at here is that the length of the contract when we talk about a coach shouldn't really matter that much. It really shouldn't. Like, is this the right guy? And that's an answer that ultimately we don't know one way or another. In 3 years, he could be fired and it looks like a really dumb, stupid hire just like Matt Patricia's was. That's very true. But we could also be looking at this as a guy that comes in and changes the culture there. And with a middling Bears organization, a middling Minnesota Vikings organization, and both of them you could argue heading in the wrong trajectory, and the Green Bay Packers sitting high and clearly atop the heap in the NFC North right now, but still you got to wonder how much longer does Aaron Rodgers play there? Like, when does that transition come to Jordan Love, or what happens in a few years? Like, you could look at the Detroit Lions potentially in 2 or 3 years as being the biggest threat to the Green Bay Packers in the NFC North. Like I said, I don't know how this general manager head coach pairing is going to work out. And a lot of it's going to depend on the general manager and what Holmes does, how he sets up his organization in terms of his front office and his scouting department. Like, all of that's going to matter. That's going to be critical because the Lions are going to have to hit in the draft. So Dan Campbell could come into the place and get the absolute most out of what he's got and still have shit and still be out in a few years because his general manager let him down. But you at least have to assume that their general manager was somewhat involved in the hiring process. You would have to assume that the general manager got a 5-year contract and Campbell got a 6-year contract, so they're willing to stick with these guys. And at this point in time, that's probably what the Lions need. They need to establish a culture. They need to establish a Lions way, and they need to stick with it for a period of time. Be patient, even if there are some bumps in the road, and see what the hell it works out to be. Now, I'm just saying, like, you never know with these guys. Dave Wanstead was once a super hot coaching candidate. So was Dave McGinnis. You know what I mean? And then you have guys like John Harbaugh, were special teams coaches that got the job. Who the hell knows? You never know with these guys. So, Lions fans, I'm curious to hear from you. Are you down with this hire? Are you caught off guard, surprised by this hire? Do you think this is another stupid, typical Detroit Lions hire? Or do you think this is different? Do you think this represents a different day in the immediate and near future history of this Detroit Lions organization? Let me know, and others of you that aren't Lions fans, feel free to blast away at the lovable loser Lions in the comments section. I'm curious to hear what all of you have to say.